Millions of women are facing poverty. The most shocking truth hitting society right now is that millions of women who once proudly declared themselves independent girl bosses are now openly admitting deep regret, facing childlessness, loneliness, and financial hardship in their 30s, 40s, and beyond, while the men they dismissed for decades have quietly walked away to build lives of peace and simplicity. This is not just a few isolated stories, it is a widespread reckoning unfolding across social media, interviews, and personal confessions where former high achieving women warn younger generations not to repeat the same mistakes of prioritizing endless career grinding over family, relationships, and biological realities that do not bend to cultural slogans. Stay with me through this entire discussion, because by the end, you will see exactly why men are no longer stepping in to rescue the situation, how the dynamics have permanently shifted, and what the real path forward looks like for anyone paying attention. And consider the stories emerging from women who once embodied the girl boss ideal. One woman, highly educated in electrical engineering from a prestigious program, pushed herself relentlessly in her 20s, landing roles at major companies like Spotify, Uber, and DoorDash. She climbed the corporate ladder with determination, embracing the hustle culture that promised empowerment and success through independence. Yet that path exacted a heavy toll on her body and mind. She developed serious health issues, including polycystic ovary syndrome, that required years to manage and continues to affect her daily life. The constant stress, long hours, and pressure to perform at peak levels eroded her sanity and physical well being. Now, having stepped away from that intense corporate world to become a stay at home girlfriend who freelances on her own terms, she describes a dramatically improved quality of life. She values a partner who brings provider energy, a problem solving mindset, and traditional masculine qualities that offer stability and protection. Reflecting on her journey, she directly advises against following the girl boss route, stating plainly that it is not worth the sacrifice. She even predicts that the current girl boss trend will eventually flip into something more traditional, being marketed as the next big thing, with women later complaining about that shift as well. Her experience highlights a pattern where the promised rewards of total independence often come at the expense of health, peace, and long term fulfillment. This individual story connects to a broader critique of how feminism has reshaped expectations for women over recent decades. Many argue that what began as a push for basic rights and opportunities evolved into something far more damaging when corporations recognized the economic advantages of pulling more people into the workforce. In earlier generations, a single income could comfortably support a family of 4 to 6, including a home, vehicles, education for children, and basic leisure. Inflation was low, costs were manageable, and life felt more balanced with one partner focused on provision and the other on home and family. Today, dual incomes have become the norm for many households just to keep pace, and single mothers or independent women often struggle to maintain similar stability. The idea that women should work alongside men in equal measure while still handling the majority of domestic responsibilities creates an exhausting double burden. Women end up working full time jobs, then coming home to childcare, household management, and emotional labor, all while society tells them this is empowerment. The result is widespread burnout, resentment, and a sense that the deal promised was never truly delivered. Feminism, in this view, was partly co opted to expand the labor pool, increase tax revenue, and boost corporate profits, leaving women to bear the hidden costs of that expansion. The pressure to do it all simultaneously proves particularly toxic. The modern narrative insists women can excel in high powered careers, maintain perfect relationships, raise children flawlessly, and pursue personal passions without compromise. In reality, life operates in seasons, and attempting to force every aspect into one intense period leads to inevitable trade offs. Something always gives way, whether it is time with children that creates lasting guilt, relationships strained by constant exhaustion, or personal health sacrificed on the altar of ambition. Women who buy into the notion that they must outwork everyone else to prove their worth often discover too late that achievement in the corporate world provides only temporary dopamine hits. True, enduring satisfaction tends to come from deep connections, stable partnerships, and the meaningful work of building a family. Research spanning decades consistently shows that once basic needs are met, additional income and status do not proportionally increase happiness. What does predict long term well being is the quality of close relationships, mutual support in a partnership, and the sense of purpose that comes from nurturing others. Biology plays a non negotiable role here as well. Fertility windows do not expand to accommodate career timelines, and the emotional bonds that form the foundation of family life require investment at the right moments. Delaying those investments in the name of independence can close doors permanently, leading to profound regret later. Projections paint a stark picture of what lies ahead if current trends continue unchecked. By around 2030, estimates suggest that nearly half of women in the workforce could end up unmarried and childless, not due to some failure on their part, but precisely because they followed the script laid out by feminist ideals. Focus intensely on education and career in your 20s. Build financial independence. Delay serious relationships because they might interfere with professional growth and assume family can come later when everything else is settled. Many women pursued that plan diligently, working extended hours, networking relentlessly, and passing on potential partners who did not fit the ideal profile at the time. In their late 20s or early 30s, they felt empowered and on track. By their late 30s or 40s, the perspective shifts dramatically. The corporate ladder no longer feels as fulfilling when the house is quiet, holidays feel empty, and the biological clock has run down. The realization hits that grinding for success aligned with someone else's timeline, not their own deepest needs. Fulfillment does not arrive on a schedule dictated by boardrooms or societal pressure. It emerges from choices that honor human nature and relational priorities. Statistics reinforce this narrative of declining well being. Since the 1970s, as women entered the workforce in massive numbers under the banner of equality, surveys have tracked a steady drop in reported happiness among women compared to previous generations. Rates of alcoholism, substance abuse, mental health challenges, and profound loneliness have climbed significantly. Divorce rates hover around 50% for first marriages, creating instability that ripples through families and society. Childlessness is rising sharply, birth rates are collapsing in many developed nations, and women increasingly report difficulty finding compatible partners who meet their evolved expectations. College educated, career focused women in their 30s often seek men who are equally or more accomplished, taller, higher earning, and emotionally available. Yet those men frequently choose younger partners who are more open to traditional dynamics in family building. The mismatch creates frustration on all sides, but women bear the heavier long term consequences when time limits options. Feminism's evolution from seeking fair treatment to demanding sameness has also eroded cultural practices that once fostered mutual respect between men and women. Chivalry, once a natural expression of appreciation for differences, has been reframed as patronizing or oppressive. Gestures like opening doors, providing protection, or pursuing with intention have declined as society insists on identical roles without acknowledging biological and psychological distinctions. The result is a dating landscape where men hesitate to initiate, fearing rejection or accusations. and women complain about the lack of pursuit while simultaneously signaling independence. Grandparents often share stories of courtship filled with respect, delayed gratification, and genuine romance leading to lasting marriages. Modern dynamics, shaped by hookup culture and instant gratification, rarely produce the same outcomes. The push for women to emulate male career paths without demanding corresponding reverence or support has left many feeling unfulfilled and unprotected in a world that no longer operates on those older principles. Economically, the shift has forced many households into survival mode rather than thriving. When one income no longer suffices due to rising costs, women enter the workforce not always by choice, but by necessity, only to find themselves carrying disproportionate loads at home. Men, meanwhile, face their own pressures, including displacement in traditional jobs by automation, globalization, and changing workplace priorities. Many have responded by stepping back from the rat race entirely, opting for simpler lifestyles, gig work, online ventures, or living below their means to preserve peace and autonomy. They recognize that adding a partner who brings high expectations without reciprocity often introduces more stress than benefit. The traditional exchange of provision for homemaking and emotional support has broken down in many cases, leaving men wary of commitments that feel one sided. Women in this position increasingly express a desire for men to return, to date, marry, and provide stability once again. Yet the response from men has been largely one of disengagement. They have listened to decades of messages telling them they are not needed, not wanted, or even problematic simply for existing as men. Many have internalized those words, found contentment in solitude or low drama arrangements, and see no incentive to re enter a system that punishes traditional roles. The men who once approached, pursued, and built families are now prioritizing their own mental health, financial security, and freedom from constant criticism or demands. This is not spite, it is a rational adaptation to changed realities. Women who made their choices in alignment with independence now confront the consequences without the fallback of male provision they once rejected. The state, long positioned as an alternative provider through benefits and policies, faces its own fiscal strains, leaving gaps that neither careers nor government can fully fill in times of economic pressure. These patterns reveal a fundamental truth about human design and societal trade offs. Women thrive in environments with strong relational networks, supportive partners, and purposeful roles within families and communities. Trading those elements for state dependency or solitary career success often leads to isolation when those structures weaken. Men similarly find greater satisfaction when their efforts are valued and reciprocated rather than dismissed or competed against. The current imbalance stems from decades of messaging that encouraged women to view men as optional at best and obstacles at worst. Now, as regrets surface and pleas for reconnection emerge, the response is muted because trust has eroded and alternatives have proven viable. Men are forging paths that allow comfort, flexibility, and peace, whether through reduced work hours, entrepreneurial efforts, or strategic minimalism. They view traditional partnerships as potential liabilities rather than necessities, especially when gratitude and respect seem scarce. The stories continue to accumulate, each adding weight to the overall picture. Women who once celebrated their solo achievements now speak candidly about the emptiness that accompanies financial success without family. They describe scrolling through social media, seeing younger versions of themselves being sold the same promises and feeling compelled to warn against it. The warnings often come too late for their own lives, but serve as cautionary tales for those still choosing. The shift is not about denying women's capabilities or rights. It is about acknowledging that unlimited striving in one direction comes with costs in others. Life's seasons demand prioritization, and forcing everything into one phase rarely works without sacrifice. Recognizing this allows for more intentional decisions earlier, potentially avoiding the regret that now dominates so many conversations. This dynamic extends beyond individual choices to broader societal health. When large numbers of people delay or forego family formation, economies face aging populations, shrinking workforces, and strained social systems. Cultural narratives that glorify perpetual independence overlook the interdependence that historically sustained communities. The push for women to become indistinguishable from men in every sphere has not produced the utopia promised. Instead, it has contributed to higher unhappiness, fractured relationships, and a sense of disconnection. True equality would honor differences while ensuring fairness, not erase distinctions in pursuit of sameness. The evidence suggests that many women, when given space to reflect, prefer arrangements where partnership provides mutual support rather than constant competition. As these realizations spread, younger women have an opportunity to learn from the experiences of those who came before. They can pursue education and careers without abandoning the possibility of family at the right time. They can seek partners who value them fully rather than treating relationships as afterthoughts. Men, too, benefit from clarity about what they offer and require in return. The era of unquestioned girl boss dominance appears to be waning as reality asserts itself. Women who once demanded solitude now confront its full implications, while men embrace the freedom they were told to reject. The balance may eventually restore itself through honest acknowledgement of human needs rather than ideological mandates. The consequences of this widespread shift extend far beyond personal regret into the very structure of how modern economies function and how generations sustain themselves over time. When women delay or entirely forego having children in pursuit of uninterrupted career trajectories, entire societies begin to face demographic collapse that no amount of policy tinkering can easily reverse. Birth rates in developed nations have fallen below replacement levels for decades now, with countries like Japan, South Korea, Italy, and Spain already experiencing population shrinkage that strains pension systems, healthcare infrastructure, and labor markets. Fewer young people entering the workforce means fewer taxpayers supporting growing numbers of retirees, creating fiscal pressure that governments attempt to alleviate through higher immigration, extended working years, or reduced benefits. Yet these measures often spark resentment rather than resolution, as native populations feel culturally displaced or economically squeezed. The women who once championed child free lifestyles as the pinnacle of freedom now witness the downstream effects. Empty schools closing in neighborhoods, hospitals struggling to staff departments, and innovation slowing because the creative energy of younger minds simply is not there in sufficient numbers. This is not speculation. Census data and fertility studies from multiple continents confirm the trend line points downward, and the primary driver remains the prioritization of individual career achievement over family formation. Women who reach their mid 30s and realize the window for natural conception has narrowed dramatically often turn to assisted reproductive technologies, spending tens of thousands of dollars on IVF cycles that offer no guarantee of success. The emotional and financial toll compounds the earlier sacrifices made in boardrooms and late night offices. Success stories exist, of course, but they receive disproportionate attention precisely because they are exceptions rather than the rule. Most women in this position face a stark choice: accept childlessness and attempt to find meaning in other areas, or pursue parenthood through increasingly complex and expensive means while hoping their bodies cooperate. The regret expressed in countless online confessions centers not only on the absence of children, but on the realization that the independence sold as liberating actually delivered isolation when the applause faded. Social media feeds, once filled with promotions, travel photos, and professional milestones, now feature vulnerable admissions of loneliness, health struggles, and second guessing. These women describe scrolling past engagement announcements, baby showers, and family vacations posted by peers who chose different paths, feeling a pang that no promotion or salary increase can soothe. Meanwhile, the men who once formed the backbone of provider roles have adapted in ways that surprise even those who predicted backlash. Large numbers have simply reduced their economic footprint, choosing lives that require far less income to maintain comfort. Hey guys, in a world pushing you to own nothing and be happy, crypto is your key to survival. Join Angry's Crypto Academy to master buying, selling, and trading crypto. Make huge profits and safeguard your wealth. Plus, discover the one crypto virtually no one is talking about, poised to create new millionaires in the upcoming bull run. The link is in the description of the video below. Go check it out now. They move to lower cost areas, share housing with like minded friends, cook simple meals, drive older vehicles, and eliminate unnecessary subscriptions. This deliberate downscaling allows them to work part time, freelance, or engage in gig economy roles without the crushing pressure of supporting a family on a single salary. They report higher life satisfaction precisely because they remove the expectation that their worth derives from how much they earn or provide. Surveys of young men show increasing numbers identifying as MGTIO or simply opting out of dating and marriage altogether, citing financial risk, potential loss of assets in divorce, false accusations, and lack of appreciation as primary deterrents. These men are not angry revolutionaries storming barricades. They are quietly withdrawing energy from a system they perceive as rigged against them. They invest in personal development, hobbies, fitness, travel on a budget, and digital side projects that generate passive income without traditional 9 to 5 obligations. The result is a growing cohort of men who appear content, relaxed, and uninterested in re entering the traditional provider role. This withdrawal accelerates workplace changes already underway through automation and artificial intelligence. Jobs once considered stable and male dominated, such as manufacturing, logistics, administrative support, and even certain white collar functions like data entry, legal research, and basic accounting, face rapid obsolescence. Women, who now constitute the majority of college graduates and hold many office based positions, find themselves disproportionately exposed to these disruptions. Entry level corporate roles that promised upward mobility often disappear before workers reach mid career, replaced by software that performs tasks faster and cheaper. The promise of lifelong employment through dedication and credentials no longer holds. Yet the cultural script still urges women to chase that script relentlessly. Men, having already distanced themselves from corporate loyalty, pivot more readily to entrepreneurial ventures, content creation, skilled trades that resist automation, or simply coasting on savings and minimal needs. They view the traditional workplace as a sinking ship and choose lifeboats instead of trying to bail water indefinitely. The cultural messaging that accompanied this economic transformation deserves close examination because it shaped expectations on both sides in profound ways. From the 1960s onward, successive waves of advocacy framed paid employment as the primary avenue for women's liberation and self actualization. Stay at home motherhood was recast as oppression rather than a valid choice, while ambition in the public sphere became the measure of worth. Media portrayed the successful woman as one who shattered glass ceilings, commanded boardrooms, and balanced everything flawlessly without complaint. Reality diverged sharply from this portrait. Women discovered that climbing corporate ladders required traits like competitiveness, emotional detachment under pressure, and willingness to prioritize work over personal life, qualities that do not always align with innate tendencies toward nurturing, relationship focus, and communal harmony. The mismatch produced exhaustion rather than empowerment for many. Men, simultaneously bombarded with messages that labeled traditional masculinity as toxic, responded by retreating from behaviors once expected of them, pursuing women assertively, committing long term, shouldering financial burdens without question. The combined effect created a feedback loop where women demanded independence while men supplied less provision, each side reacting to the other's signals until mutual disengagement became the default. Younger women observing this landscape now face a clearer set of trade offs than their predecessors did. They see friends and older sisters who followed the high achievement path ending up single, financially stretched, and emotionally unfulfilled. They also see women who married earlier, started families in their 20s, and built stable households expressing greater overall contentment despite lower career peaks. The contrast prompts questions about timing, priorities, and what truly constitutes security in an uncertain world. Some choose hybrid approaches, pursuing education and meaningful work while remaining open to serious relationships and family at younger ages. Others double down on independence, convinced that the right partner will eventually appear or that solo life offers superior freedom. Time will reveal which strategy yields better long term outcomes, but early indicators suggest that those who integrate relational goals with professional ones avoid the sharpest edges of regret. Biology remains indifferent to ideology. Ovarian reserve declines predictably, and the energy required for parenting peaks in younger adulthood. Acknowledging these facts does not diminish women's agency. It equips them to make decisions with eyes wide open rather than blinded by slogans. Economic realities reinforce the need for realism. Housing costs in major cities have outpaced wage growth for decades, making single income households increasingly rare even among dual earner couples. Childcare expenses rival mortgage payments in many areas, forcing families into difficult choices about whether both parents work full time or one steps back. Women who earn high salaries sometimes discover that after taxes, childcare, commuting, professional attire, and convenience foods, their net contribution barely covers the added stress. Lower earning women face even steeper barriers, often trapped in cycles of low wage work that barely sustain independent living, let alone family formation. The feminist assertion that paid labor inherently liberates overlooks these material constraints. True liberation would include the option to prioritize home and children without economic penalty. Yet, policy rarely supports that choice effectively. Tax codes, workplace structures, and cultural prestige all tilt toward continuous employment rather than flexible arrangements that accommodate family life. Men's response to these pressures manifests in measurable ways. Labor force participation rates for prime age men have declined steadily since the 1950s, with sharper drops in recent years. Some attribute the trend to discouragement from poor job prospects, others to conscious lifestyle choices favoring leisure over grind. Regardless of cause, the outcome remains the same: fewer men competing for traditional breadwinner positions, leaving more space for women in those roles while simultaneously reducing the pool of potential providers. The men who remain engaged often adopt pragmatic attitudes, seeking partners who bring complementary value rather than additional demands. They prioritize women who demonstrate gratitude, emotional stability, and willingness to build together rather than compete. This selectivity frustrates women conditioned to believe their credentials and independence alone suffice to attract high quality partners. Compatibility requires alignment on values, roles, and life goals. Elements frequently sidelined in favor of superficial markers like income or status. The loneliness epidemic affecting both genders stems directly from these mismatched expectations. Women report higher rates of social isolation despite larger friend networks, largely because deep emotional intimacy often flows from committed partnerships and family bonds. Men, while also experiencing loneliness, tend to cope through solitary pursuits or male camaraderie that demands less emotional labor. The divergence widens over time, creating two parallel populations. Women seeking connection they increasingly struggle to find, and men content with lower drama arrangements that preserve autonomy. Dating apps exacerbate the problem by turning partner selection into a consumer marketplace where superficial traits dominate and rejection becomes normalized. Genuine courtship, slow, intentional, respectful, has become rare, replaced by swiping, ghosting, and transactional interactions. Women who once dismissed such traditional approaches now express nostalgia for them. Yet the cultural soil that nurtured those approaches has eroded. Restoring balance requires cultural honesty rather than new slogans. Acknowledging that men and women differ in average preferences, strengths, and life priorities does not equate to discrimination. It reflects observable reality confirmed by psychology, sociology, and everyday experience. Women generally place higher value on emotional security, relational depth, and family stability, while men prioritize respect, autonomy, and achievement. Policies and narratives that ignore these differences produce friction rather than harmony. Encouraging women to pursue careers while simultaneously supporting family formation through affordable housing, parental leave for both parents, and cultural celebration of homemaking would allow genuine choice. Similarly, affirming men's provider instincts without shaming them as outdated would encourage investment in relationships rather than withdrawal. Neither side benefits from the current zero sum framing where one group's gain requires the other's loss. The women now speaking out against the girl boss myth perform a valuable service by sharing unfiltered truth. Their stories cut through polished marketing and corporate propaganda, offering younger generations a chance to course correct before similar regrets accumulate. They describe the quiet moments of clarity that arrive after the excitement of promotions fades. Sitting alone in nice apartments, scrolling past family gatherings, wondering if the trade off was worth it. They admit that financial independence feels hollow without someone to share it with meaningfully. They warn that the state cannot replace a committed partner, that the careers do not provide hugs at the end of hard days, and that time cannot be rewound. These admissions carry weight because they come from women who lived the experiment and found its promises wanting. Men, having absorbed decades of criticism, now protect their peace with determination. They build lives around hobbies, fitness, travel, creative projects, and low pressure income streams. They avoid entanglements that threaten their financial security or mental health. They recognize that modern relationships often demand emotional availability without reciprocal respect or gratitude. Until cultural signals change to value men's contributions rather than pathologize them, large numbers will continue opting out. The result is a stalemate where women lament the absence of good men while men decline to volunteer for roles they perceive as thankless. This stalemate need not become permanent. Honest dialogue that respects both perspectives can rebuild trust. Women can affirm that partnership offers strength rather than weakness, that interdependence beats isolation, and that biological realities deserve consideration in life planning. Men can recognize that many women genuinely seek mutual support rather than exploitation, that appreciation goes further than criticism, and that committed relationships remain one of life's greatest sources of meaning. Both sides benefit when expectations align with human nature rather than ideological purity. The current reckoning, painful as it appears, may ultimately catalyze that realignment by exposing the costs of imbalance. Young people watching these developments have an advantage their parents' generation lacked: access to unvarnished accounts from those who went before. Social media, for all its flaws, amplifies voices that mainstream outlets once ignored. Women in their 30s and 40s posting raw reflections reach millions of followers who absorb the lessons vicariously. The cumulative effect shifts perceptions gradually but powerfully. Fewer young women now declare unreservedly that marriage and children represent failure or oppression. More express interest in balanced lives that include both achievement and family. They seek role models who demonstrate that success need not come at the expense of connection. They question corporate cultures that demand everything while offering little security in return. This emerging awareness represents hope that the pendulum may swing toward healthier dynamics without rejecting legitimate gains in opportunity. The path forward lies in practicality rather than ideology. Individuals thrive when they make decisions based on evidence, personal values, and realistic timelines rather than external scripts. Women benefit from pursuing education and careers while keeping family possibilities open rather than closed. Men benefit from developing skills, financial discipline, and emotional maturity that make them attractive partners without sacrificing self respect. Couples benefit from clear communication about roles, expectations, and shared goals before commitment. Societies benefit when they support diverse family structures without privileging one model above others. The experiment of radical independence has yielded valuable data. Now comes the task of integrating that data into wiser choices. The women who once embodied the girl boss archetype and now caution against it deserve recognition for their courage. Admitting that a path once celebrated led to unexpected hardship requires humility and strength. Their warnings serve as guardrails for those still choosing directions. By sharing the full spectrum of their experiences, the highs of professional accomplishment alongside the lows of personal emptiness, they provide a more complete picture than any motivational speech or corporate campaign ever could. Younger women who heed those warnings gain the chance to craft lives that honor both ambition and attachment, provision and nurture, independence and interdependence. Men who observe the shift gain permission to value their own peace without guilt. Everyone stands to benefit when reality guides decisions rather than fantasy. The intensity of this transformation underscores a timeless truth. Human beings flourish within relationships and communities, not in perpetual solitude or competition. The attempt to engineer society around individual maximization at the expense of natural bonds has produced measurable suffering on a large scale. Correcting course requires neither regression nor revolution, but honest reckoning with what works and what does not. Women who regret their choices, men who have walked away, and younger generations observing both now participate in that reckoning. The outcome remains unwritten, but the direction points toward greater alignment between cultural ideals and biological, psychological, and economic realities. The fallout from these demographic shifts reaches into every corner of daily existence, reshaping cities, schools, workplaces, and even the cultural atmosphere that surrounds growing children. Neighborhoods once bustling with young families now feature more empty playgrounds and shuttered daycare centers as birth rates continue their steady decline. Elementary schools consolidate or close entirely in regions where fertility has dropped below 1.5 children per woman, forcing longer commutes for the remaining students and reducing the vibrant chaos that once defined community life. Teachers report smaller classes that allow more individualized attention, but also express concern over the long term viability of their profession when fewer children enter the system each year. Real estate markets adjust accordingly. Family sized homes in suburban areas sit longer on the market. Prices stagnate or fall relative to smaller condos and urban apartments preferred by childless professionals. Cities that once expanded outward to accommodate growing populations now grapple with infrastructure built for larger cohorts that no longer exist, leading to underutilized public transit, vacant commercial spaces, and budget shortfalls when tax bases shrink. Governments respond with increasingly desperate measures to reverse the trend, offering baby bonuses, extended parental leave, subsidized childcare, and tax credits that grow more generous with each passing year. Yet these incentives rarely move the needle significantly because the underlying decision calculus has changed. Women who have invested heavily in education and career development weigh the costs of stepping away from momentum they fought hard to build. The fear of falling behind professionally, losing seniority, or facing bias upon return often outweighs financial perks. Many conclude that the structural barriers remain too high. Inflexible work schedules, lack of affordable housing near good schools, and societal judgment that still subtly penalizes mothers who prioritize family over endless availability. Men, observing these dynamics, see little reason to push for larger families when the economic and emotional burdens fall disproportionately on one partner, while cultural support remains lukewarm at best. This reluctance feeds into broader economic stagnation that compounds the original problem. Consumer markets, once driven by family spending, diapers, toys, school supplies, larger vehicles, bigger homes, contract as childless households allocate resources differently. Industries built around childhood and family life face declining demand, leading to layoffs and reduced innovation in those sectors. Meanwhile, sectors catering to single adults or older populations expand. Luxury travel, high end fitness, pet products, premium skincare, and retirement planning services flourish. The economy slowly reorients around prolonged individualism rather than generational renewal, creating a feedback loop where fewer births lead to slower growth, which in turn discourages family formation because financial security feels more precarious. The psychological dimension of this transformation deserves equal attention because it shapes behavior in ways statistics alone cannot capture. Women who reach their late 30s without children often describe a pervasive sense of missing something fundamental, quiet grief that surfaces in unexpected moments. Holidays become reminders of absence rather than celebration. Social gatherings with friends who have children highlight differences in life stages that grow harder to bridge over time. Conversations shift from shared experiences of parenting to professional updates and travel plans, leaving gaps where deeper connection once existed. Many report increased anxiety about aging alone, wondering who will provide care if serious illness strikes or mobility declines. The independence once celebrated begins to feel like a fragile shield against vulnerability rather than genuine strength. Men experience their own version of the shift, though it manifests differently. Those who have chosen solitude or minimal commitment lifestyles frequently describe relief at escaping constant negotiation, performance pressure, and the risk of emotional or financial exploitation. They build routines centered on personal control, morning workouts, reading, skill building projects, occasional travel, and friendships that demand little emotional labor. The absence of a partner removes daily friction, but also eliminates certain forms of intimacy and shared purpose. Some embrace this trade off willingly, concluding that peace outweighs companionship when the latter comes with high costs. Others quietly acknowledge moments of loneliness, but view them as preferable to the alternative of entering relationships where respect feels conditional and gratitude scarce. The dating market reflects these divergent paths with brutal clarity. Women in their 30s and 40s who once focused exclusively on career advancement now enter the pool expecting men who match or exceed their achievements while also offering traditional provider qualities. The available men who fit that profile often prefer younger partners whose timelines align better with family formation and who carry fewer preconceptions about rigid equality in every aspect of life. This mismatch produces frustration on the women's side and wariness on the men's side. Online dating platforms amplify the disconnect through algorithms that prioritize superficial compatibility while burying deeper value alignment. Profiles emphasize credentials, travel photos, and lifestyle aesthetics over character traits like loyalty, patience, or willingness to support a partner's goals. The result is a superficial marketplace where genuine connection struggles to emerge. Cultural institutions that once reinforced family formation have weakened considerably. Religious communities that emphasize marriage and children as central purposes have lost influence among younger cohorts. Media portrayals of happy families appear less frequently than depictions of glamorous single life or complicated non traditional arrangements. Educational systems prioritize individual achievement and self expression over preparation for relational responsibilities. The cumulative effect leaves many young adults without clear models for building lasting partnerships or raising children successfully. They inherit a world that celebrates autonomy but provides few practical tools for interdependence, creating confusion when natural desires for connection surface. Despite these challenges, pockets of resistance and alternative models persist and even grow. Some women consciously choose to marry and start families earlier, accepting trade offs in career trajectory for the security and meaning that come from close relationships. They seek partners who value family leadership and mutual support rather than competition. These couples often build lives in more affordable regions, prioritize one income supplemented by flexible remote work, and cultivate communities that reinforce their choices. They report higher satisfaction levels than peers who delayed family indefinitely, citing the joy of watching children grow and the depth of partnership forged through shared challenges. Men who commit to these arrangements frequently describe renewed purpose that solitary living cannot replicate. They embrace provider roles not out of obligation, but because they find fulfillment in creating stability for loved ones. The respect and appreciation they receive within these relationships contrasts sharply with the criticism encountered in broader culture, reinforcing their decision to invest rather than withdraw. These couples tend to form intentional communities, whether through churches, homeschool networks, or neighborhood groups, that provide practical and emotional support, reducing isolation and increasing resilience against economic pressures. Entrepreneurial responses also emerge as individuals seek alternatives to failing traditional systems. Women who left corporate environments often launch businesses that accommodate family life. Online coaching, freelance consulting, content creation, or small scale product lines that generate income without rigid schedules. Men continue expanding in digital spaces, software development, e commerce, trading, creative media, where location independence and flexible hours allow them to maintain comfort while building wealth gradually. These ventures rarely produce overnight riches, but provide enough to sustain simple, fulfilling lives without reliance on unstable corporate ladders. The conversation around gender roles evolves as more voices challenge the extremes on both sides. Influential women publicly affirm that partnership does not equal subordination and that family can coexist with meaningful work when priorities align realistically. They advocate for policies that make dual paths viable, remote work options, affordable childcare without forcing both parents into full time employment, housing reforms that reduce cost burdens, and cultural narratives that celebrate diverse family arrangements rather than ranking them hierarchically. Men respond by articulating what they need to re engage: genuine respect, reciprocity in effort, and freedom from constant scrutiny of traditional masculine traits. This emerging dialogue represents progress beyond the current impasse. It acknowledges that neither total independence nor rigid traditionalism fully satisfies human needs in modern contexts. Most people seek a middle path where individual growth and relational depth reinforce rather than compete with each other. Achieving that balance requires dismantling outdated assumptions on both sides. The notion that career success defines worth for women, and the idea that provision alone defines value for men. When both genders recognize complementary strengths rather than identical roles, partnerships become more stable and when satisfying. Younger generations already show signs of absorbing these lessons. Social media trends reveal growing interest in traditional skills: cooking from scratch, gardening, home maintenance, sewing, once dismissed as outdated. Discussions about fertility awareness, relationship red flags, and realistic life planning gain traction among people in their late teens and early 20s. Many express skepticism toward corporate promises of endless upward mobility and instead prioritize financial independence through multiple income streams that allow flexibility for family. They seek partners who share core values rather than superficial status markers, understanding that long term compatibility matters more than initial chemistry. These shifts occur gradually but gain momentum as personal stories accumulate. Women who regret delaying family share candid reflections that resonate deeply with audiences still forming their own plans. Men who thrive in simplified lives demonstrate that peace remains possible without traditional commitments, challenging the narrative that singledom equates to failure. Together, these accounts create a richer tapestry of possibilities, showing that no single path guarantees happiness, but informed choices increase the odds considerably. The economic implications of continued decline demand attention from policymakers who can no longer ignore the math. Shrinking workforces threaten entitlement programs built on assumptions of perpetual population growth. Healthcare systems face shortages of younger workers needed to care for aging populations. Innovation slows when fewer minds tackle emerging problems. Addressing these issues requires more than financial incentives. It calls for cultural reorientation toward valuing family formation as a societal good rather than a private lifestyle choice. Policies that reduce housing costs, support flexible work, and remove penalties for part time or interrupted careers would help considerably. Cultural reinforcement through media, education, and community institutions could restore balance without coercion. Ultimately, the resolution lies in individual agency guided by clearer understanding of consequences. Women benefit from recognizing that time horizons for family differ markedly from career timelines and that biological limits exist regardless of willpower or policy. Men gain from understanding that healthy partnerships offer rewards worth protecting rather than liabilities to avoid. Both sides thrive when mutual respect replaces suspicion and when shared purpose replaces solitary striving. The current period of reckoning, though uncomfortable, provides the raw material for rebuilding on firmer foundations. The women stepping forward with warnings perform essential work by bridging generational gaps with honesty. Their experiences cut through idealized narratives and offer practical wisdom that no textbook or motivational speaker can match. By admitting where the path diverged from expectations, they equip others to navigate similar choices with greater awareness. Younger women who listen closely gain the opportunity to integrate ambition with attachment rather than forcing an either or decision. They can pursue education and professional growth while remaining attuned to relational opportunities that appear at younger ages. They learn to evaluate partners based on character and compatibility rather than RISM credentials alone. Men observing this evolution find validation in their decision to prioritize peace while also receiving subtle permission to re engage when conditions improve. They see that withdrawal served as necessary self preservation, but need not become permanent isolation. When respect returns and reciprocity becomes standard, many prove willing to invest again. The key lies in cultural signals that value men's contributions without qualification and affirm women's desire for partnership without diminishing their capabilities. This potential realignment promises benefits that extend beyond individuals to entire communities. Stable families produce more resilient children who grow into productive adults. Strong partnerships model healthy interdependence for future generations. Economies supported by generational renewal avoid the sharp contractions that accompany population collapse. Societies that honor both autonomy and connection foster greater overall well being than those that force one at the expense of the other. The journey toward that balance continues through countless small decisions made every day. Women choosing partners earlier rather than waiting for perfect alignment. Men stepping forward when they encounter genuine appreciation rather than defaulting to withdrawal. Couples negotiating roles that suit their unique strengths rather than following external scripts. Communities supporting families through practical help rather than judgment. Each action contributes to momentum that gradually shifts the broader landscape. The intensity of the current moment stems from the scale of the experiment and the clarity of its results. What began as a movement for opportunity morphed into a prescription for perpetual independence that clashed with fundamental human needs. The resulting discomfort forces reconsideration at every level, from personal life planning to national policy. The pain of regret, the relief of simplicity, the longing for connection, and the satisfaction of autonomy all coexist in the present, providing data points for wiser navigation ahead. Those who reach the end of this exploration belong to a select group that possesses the patience to examine complex realities without seeking simplistic answers. You have followed the thread through personal stories, economic trends, cultural shifts, demographic projections, and psychological insights. The picture that emerges shows neither villains nor victims, but human beings responding logically to incentives and messages they received over decades. Understanding this dynamic equips anyone paying attention to make choices that align more closely with lasting fulfillment rather than temporary validation. The scale of this transformation becomes even clearer when examining how entire industries now pivot to serve an aging, child scarce population rather than vibrant young families. Pharmaceutical companies ramp up research into hormone replacement therapies, fertility preservation techniques, and treatments for age related chronic conditions, because those represent reliable long-term revenue streams in markets where newborn-related products once dominated shelf space. Toy manufacturers diversify into collectibles, nostalgia items, and adult oriented entertainment because the traditional pipeline of childhood birthdays and holidays no longer delivers consistent growth. Clothing brands shift emphasis toward athleisure for solitary fitness routines. Professional wardrobes designed for endless video calls and premium casual wear that signals individual success rather than family practicality. Even food production adjusts. Portion controlled meals for one or two, premium pet food marketed as family substitutes, and ready to eat options that require minimal preparation time because busy single professionals rarely cook elaborate meals from scratch for non existent children. This reorientation of commerce reflects a deeper cultural pivot toward extended adolescence and prolonged self focus. Marketing campaigns increasingly target people in their 30s and 40s as though they remain in perpetual discovery mode, encouraging purchases that promise personal reinvention rather than generational continuity. Travel companies promote solo adventures and group retreats centered on self care and transformation. Fitness influencers sell programs built around sculpting the perfect individual physique rather than maintaining energy for parenting demands. Financial products emphasize retirement planning for single lifestyles, with advisors routinely asking clients whether they anticipate supporting dependents or planning purely for personal comfort in later decades. The collective message reinforces the idea that fulfillment arrives through accumulation of experiences, possessions, and status markers rather than through the slower, less glamorous work of raising the next generation. Yet, beneath the polished surface of these lifestyle promotions lies mounting evidence of dissatisfaction that refuses to stay hidden. Anonymous forums overflow with threads where women in their late 30s confess to panic attacks triggered by baby announcements from younger acquaintances. They describe the strange dissonance of achieving financial milestones while feeling emotionally bankrupt. Some admit to envying the exhaustion of friends who complain about sleepless nights with infants because at least those friends have tangible purpose waiting at home every evening. The envy often surfaces most acutely around major holidays when curated family photos flood feeds and highlight the contrast between bustling households and quiet apartments. These women frequently note that no salary bump, corner office, or luxury vacation fills the specific void left by absent children and partners. Men contribute their own parallel confessions in spaces where vulnerability emerges without fear of judgment. Many describe reaching a point where the prospect of marriage feels like volunteering for a high stakes gamble with unfavorable odds. They point to statistics showing that women initiate roughly 70% of divorces, often citing irreconcilable differences after years of perceived emotional labor imbalance. They reference horror stories of asset division, alimony obligations, child support payments that continue regardless of custody arrangements, and the social stigma that attaches to fathers post separation. These accounts circulate widely enough that even men who desire family life approach the topic with caution, insisting on prenuptial agreements, clear role discussions up front, and partners who demonstrate consistent appreciation rather than entitlement. The cumulative effect creates hesitation that women interpret as disinterest or immaturity, widening the gulf further. Education systems mirror and amplify these trends by continuing to emphasize credentials as the primary path to security and identity. Curricula prioritize STEM fields, leadership training, and entrepreneurial skills, while offering minimal guidance on relational intelligence, family economics, or realistic life sequencing. Young women graduate with mountains of debt and ambitious 5 year plans that rarely include contingencies for a partnership or parenthood. Young men absorb the same achievement oriented messaging, but pair it with growing awareness that traditional rewards, respect, gratitude, stable home life have become unreliable. Many respond by minimizing their exposure to systems that demand maximum output for diminishing returns. They pursue trade certifications, self taught coding boot camps, or niche online businesses that allow geographic flexibility and time sovereignty. The contrast between the two groups sharpens. Women climbing institutional ladders that grow increasingly precarious. Men building independent paths that prioritize control over prestige. Housing patterns reveal another layer of adaptation. Young professionals cluster in expensive urban cores where single bedroom apartments command premium rents because those locations offer proximity to nightlife, networking events, and cultural amenities valued by child free lifestyles. Suburban areas designed for families see slower appreciation and longer vacancy periods unless prices drop enough to attract remote workers fleeing high cost cities. Developers respond by converting family oriented complexes into micro unit buildings or senior living facilities. The physical landscape literally reshapes itself around fewer children and more solitary adults, reinforcing the social reality through architecture and zoning. Mental health statistics paint perhaps the starkest contrast between the marketed image of empowered independence and lived experience. Women report rising rates of anxiety disorders, depression, and burnout syndromes that correlate strongly with prolonged singlehood and career centric identities. Therapists note an uptick in clients who present with existential questions about purpose after reaching external markers of success. Many describe feeling cheated by a culture that promised happiness through achievement but delivered emptiness instead. Men show different patterns: lower rates of diagnosed depression, but higher instances of substance use, gaming addiction, and social withdrawal as coping mechanisms. Both groups suffer from loneliness epidemics documented in national surveys, yet the solutions offered, more self care routines, therapy apps, pet adoption, treat symptoms rather than addressing root causes tied to eroded family structures. Policy discussions around these issues remain frustratingly narrow. Debates center on paid leave extensions, childcare subsidies, and fertility treatments covered by insurance while rarely touching the cultural incentives that discourage early family formation in the first place. Proposals to make housing more affordable often stall because powerful interests benefit from high property values and urban density. Workplace reforms that would allow true flexibility, year long sabbaticals for parenting, part time executive tracks without career death, widespread remote options, face resistance from corporations accustomed to extracting maximum hours from employees. Until these structural barriers receive serious attention, financial carrots alone will continue falling short. Communities that buck the dominant trend offer instructive counterexamples. Certain religious groups maintain above replacement fertility rates by embedding family formation within a coherent worldview that values children as blessings rather than burdens. They create mutual aid networks that reduce economic pressure, shared childcare, hand me down clothing circuits, communal meals during tough seasons. Secular versions emerge in intentional neighborhoods where families pool resources for bulk purchasing, homeschooling cooperatives, and neighborhood watch systems that enhance safety and belonging. These arrangements demonstrate that affordability and support need not depend solely on government intervention. They can arise organically when people share common values and practical goals. Individuals who thrive outside mainstream expectations frequently combine elements from both worlds. Women who maintain part time professional work while raising young children report greater life satisfaction than peers who chase full time corporate advancement or those who abandon careers entirely without alternative purpose. They leverage remote opportunities, freelance contracts, or small businesses that scale with family demands rather than against them. Men who commit to such arrangements often discover unexpected rewards. The pride of watching children develop under their guidance, the depth of trust built through consistent provision, the quiet gratitude expressed in everyday moments. These couples tend to avoid the resentment that festers when one partner feels perpetually overburdened or undervalued. Technology accelerates some adaptations while complicating others. Dating platforms experiment with value based matching that goes beyond photos and income brackets, attempting to pair people according to family orientation, lifestyle preferences, and long term vision. Fertility tracking apps empower women to understand their biological windows with precision, enabling more informed sequencing of education, career, and relationships. Remote work tools allow couples to live in lower cost regions while maintaining professional income, easing the financial strain that once forced dual full time employment. Yet, technology also intensifies comparison culture, bombarding users with highlight reels that make ordinary family life appear dull by contrast with exotic solo adventures or meticulously curated couple goals. The cumulative weight of these observations points toward an inevitable course correction. Cultures cannot sustain themselves indefinitely on declining births and rising isolation without triggering systemic strain that forces adaptation. Whether through gradual cultural rediscovery of family as central purpose, policy innovations that genuinely support balanced lives, or simply the exhaustion of current models, change will arrive. The women now voicing regret serve as early warning signals, their stories functioning like canaries in a coal mine that alert others before conditions become unlivable. Younger cohorts already display subtle but meaningful shifts in priorities. Surveys of people in their early 20s show increasing percentages who view marriage positively and express desire for children within realistic timeframes. They question hustle culture more openly, seeking work that funds life rather than consuming it entirely. They prioritize mental health boundaries, financial independence before commitment, and partners who demonstrate emotional maturity over impressive resumes. These attitudes suggest that the pendulum, having swung far toward individualism, begins its return arc, not to rigid traditionalism, but to pragmatic integration of personal growth with relational depth. The path ahead favors those who act on accurate information rather than prevailing narratives. Women gain advantage by treating their 20s as windows of opportunity for both professional foundation and serious partner evaluation rather than exclusive focus on one or the other. Men benefit from developing skills, character, and financial discipline that make them attractive without compromising self respect. Both gain when they communicate expectations transparently and negotiate roles that play to individual strengths rather than ideological ideals. This extended examination has traced the ripple effects of a single powerful idea on unlimited independence as the highest good through personal lives, economic structures, cultural institutions, demographic realities, and psychological well being. The pattern that emerges shows neither catastrophe nor triumph, but a predictable outcome when human nature collides with mismatched incentives. Those who reach this point have invested serious time in understanding dynamics most people prefer to ignore or simplify. That investment positions you to navigate coming years with greater clarity and intention. The relentless march of these changes carves visible marks across the landscape of everyday institutions that once operated on assumptions of steady population renewal and family centered stability. Public libraries in many mid sized towns now dedicate larger sections to adult continuing education courses and digital literacy workshops because children's sections see fewer visitors checking out picture books or attending story hours. Community centers pivot programming toward senior fitness classes, book clubs for retirees, and hobby groups for empty nesters because youth sports leagues shrink year after year and summer camps struggle to fill slots. Volunteer organizations that historically relied on parents coordinating bake sales, field trips, and fundraisers find themselves shorthanded as fewer families participate, and those who do spread themselves thinner across multiple commitments. The social fabric frays in subtle ways. Neighborhood block parties grow quieter. Holiday light displays appear on fewer houses and local festivals scale back children's activities because demand evaporates. Higher education institutions feel the pinch most acutely in enrollment projections that force painful decisions about program cuts and campus consolidation. Liberal arts colleges with long histories face existential threats when incoming classes shrink by double digit percentages annually. Administrators respond by aggressively marketing to international students, launching online degree mills, and merging departments to survive on reduced tuition revenue. The prestige universities maintain selectivity through brand power alone, but even they quietly expand graduate programs to offset declining undergraduate numbers. Faculty lines disappear, adjunctification accelerates, and research funding becomes more competitive as governments redirect resources toward fields deemed economically urgent rather than broadly humanistic. The intellectual ecosystem that once trained generations of professionals now trains fewer people overall, concentrating talent in narrower channels and risking stagnation in fields that require sustained human capital investment over decades. Healthcare delivery systems confront parallel pressures that compound over time. Pediatric wings in regional hospitals convert to adult overflow units or close outright because routine well child visits decline and childhood diseases appear less frequently in smaller cohorts. Obstetric departments merge or shutter when delivery volumes fall below sustainable thresholds, forcing expectant mothers to travel farther for prenatal care and births. Geriatric and palliative care services expand rapidly to meet the needs of aging populations that outnumber younger caregivers. Nursing schools report difficulty filling seats despite nationwide shortages because fewer young women choose healthcare professions that demand shift work incompatible with family life. The result creates a mismatch where demand for long term care skyrockets while the supply of compassionate, trained professionals dwindles, leading to higher burnout, reliance on immigrant labor, and quality concerns that erode public trust in the system. Transportation infrastructure, built during boom decades, now serves populations that move differently and less often with children in tow. School bus fleets shrink as districts consolidate routes and encourage walking or biking for safety and cost reasons. Highway expansion projects face scrutiny when projections show declining commuter volumes from dual income households that once justified new lanes. Public transit agencies in smaller cities cut weekend and evening service because ridership concentrates in weekday professional commutes rather than family errands. Airports see steady growth in business class lounges and premium solo traveler amenities, while family restrooms and children's play areas receive less investment. The physical movement of people gradually conforms to the realities of fewer large households and more independent adults pursuing individual schedules. Retail environments adapt with ruthless efficiency to these demographic realities. Big box stores reduce square footage devoted to baby products, strollers, car seats, and toddler clothing, while expanding aisles for premium pet supplies, high end home office furniture, and luxury kitchen gadgets designed for gourmet cooking for one or two. Mall anchor stores that once thrived on back to school shopping sprees now anchor around experiential retail, escape rooms, virtual reality arcades, and upscale food halls that cater to date nights and friend groups rather than family outings. Online marketplaces notice similar patterns, with algorithms pushing personalized recommendations for noise canceling headphones, ergonomic chairs, subscription meal kits, and self improvement courses over family oriented purchases like board games, outdoor play equipment, or bulk snack packs. The entertainment industry mirrors this shift by producing content that resonates with prolonged singlehood and delayed maturity. Streaming platforms greenlight series centered on ambitious professionals navigating complicated personal lives without children in the picture. Reality shows glorify solo travel challenges, luxury home renovations for one, and competitive dating formats that treat partnership as entertainment rather than foundation. Children's programming shrinks in relative importance, while adult animation, true crime documentaries, and prestige dramas dominate viewing hours. Toy to screen adaptations target nostalgia markets. Adults buying collectibles tied to franchises they loved as children, because current child audiences represent a smaller share of overall consumer spending power. Sports leagues and recreational activities adjust their footprint accordingly. Youth soccer, baseball, and gymnastics programs consolidate into regional select teams rather than widespread community recreation because participation rates drop. Adult recreational leagues for kickball, cornhole, and pickleball explode in popularity among people in their 30s and 40s seeking low commitment social outlets that fit around demanding careers and minimal family obligations. Golf courses thrive on twilight rates and simulator bays for solo practice sessions. Fitness studios market spin classes, yoga retreats, and strength training programs as paths to personal mastery and stress relief rather than preparation for active parenting. The legal system absorbs ripple effects that manifest in shifting caseloads and evolving jurisprudence. Family court dockets lighten in some jurisdictions as marriage rates fall and divorce filings decline simply because fewer couples ever formalize unions. Child custody disputes decrease in volume but grow more acrimonious when they occur because smaller family sizes concentrate emotional investment in single children. Elder law practices boom as attorneys handle trusts, powers of attorney, and guardianship proceedings for aging individuals without adult children nearby to assume responsibility. Probate courts process more interstate estates where distant relatives or state agencies step in due to absent direct descendants. The law slowly recalibrates around a society where blood ties thin and chosen families or institutional care replace traditional kinship networks. Religious institutions face their own demographic reckoning that threatens long term viability. Congregations with aging memberships watch Sunday school classrooms empty, and youth groups dissolve for lack of participants. Seminaries report declining enrollment among men who once viewed ministry as a path to leadership within stable family communities. Charitable arms of churches redirect resources toward senior services, meals on wheels, transportation to medical appointments, grief support, because those needs grow while orphanage level child welfare demands shrink. Some denominations respond by planting house churches or micro congregations that emphasize intimate fellowship over large programs, while others merge parishes to pool dwindling resources. The spiritual landscape fragments as traditional family centric worship gives way to more individualized expressions of faith that accommodate solitary lifestyles. Political discourse around these trends remains polarized and often superficial. One side frames declining births as a crisis requiring aggressive natalist policies, immigration surges, and cultural campaigns to restore traditional values. The other side celebrates falling fertility as environmental progress, evidence of women's autonomy, and liberation from outdated expectations. Both positions tend to avoid the messy middle ground where ordinary people weigh personal desires against systemic pressures and biological limits. Campaign platforms rarely address the practical barriers, housing affordability, workplace rigidity, partner scarcity, with the seriousness they deserve. Voters receive platitudes instead of blueprints, leaving individuals to navigate the consequences largely on their own. Entrepreneurs spot opportunity amid the chaos and build businesses that serve the emerging reality. Companies launch subscription boxes for solo living essentials, premium coffee, houseplants, noise machines, weighted blankets, and curated books that promise companionship through reading. Dating coaches pivot toward high ticket programs that teach women how to signal openness to family without sacrificing professional identity, while teaching men how to screen for genuine compatibility rather than surface level achievement. Fertility consultants offer concierge services that combine medical advice, financial planning, and emotional support for women pursuing solo parenthood through donor sperm or egg freezing. Retirement communities market themselves as chosen family villages where childless adults build intentional support networks that mimic extended kinship without blood ties. These market responses demonstrate resilience and ingenuity, but also highlight the depth of the underlying shift. People adapt because they must, finding ways to construct meaning and connection when older pathways narrow or close entirely. The ingenuity proves that human creativity persists even under constraint, yet it also underscores how much energy now diverts toward compensating for absent family structures rather than building upon them. Observers who track these patterns over years notice accelerating feedback loops. Fewer children mean fewer future parents, which accelerates decline in subsequent generations. Economic contraction from shrinking consumer bases reduces job opportunities, which discourages family formation among those who remain. Cultural narratives reinforce individualism because fewer counterexamples of thriving families exist to challenge the dominant story. Each element strengthens the others, creating momentum that resists easy reversal. Yet counterforces gather strength in unexpected places. Rural areas and smaller cities with lower living costs attract young couples priced out of urban centers, allowing one partner to stay home or work part time while raising children. Homeschool networks expand rapidly, providing socialization and education outside failing public systems and creating built in communities of like minded families. Online platforms host thriving subcultures where people share strategies for balancing ambition with attachment. Dual income models with strict boundaries, single income households in affordable regions, intentional co parenting arrangements among friends. These experiments remain small, but multiply because they address real pain points that mainstream culture ignores. Women who once embraced the full girl boss identity and later stepped away often become the most effective advocates for change. They speak with the authority of lived experience when they describe how corporate success felt increasingly hollow against the backdrop of empty evenings and silent homes. Their platforms grow because authenticity cuts through polished facades. They reach younger women who sense the mismatch between promised empowerment and mounting exhaustion. The message resonates most powerfully when delivered without bitterness, simply as clear eyed assessment. You can achieve a great deal, but not everything simultaneously, and the things that matter most often require presence at specific moments that calendars cannot reschedule. Men who maintain distance from traditional roles continue refining lives that suit their temperament and values. They master skills that generate income without corporate oversight. Woodworking, welding, software development, copywriting, e commerce arbitrage. They cultivate friendships based on shared activities rather than emotional disclosure. They travel light, invest conservatively, and maintain physical health as insurance against future uncertainty. Their contentment challenges the narrative that long term partnership remains essential for fulfillment. At the same time, many quietly admit that certain voids persist. Moments of pride in a child's accomplishment, the comfort of a long term companion during hardship that no solo achievement fully replaces. The honesty on both sides creates space for potential reconciliation when conditions improve. The broader society stands at a crossroads where continued drift risks deeper fragmentation, while deliberate redirection offers possibility of renewal. No single policy or cultural campaign will flip the trajectory overnight. Change accrues through thousands of individual decisions. Women accepting proposals in their late 20s rather than waiting for perfect alignment, men re entering dating with clearer boundaries and realistic expectations, employers offering genuine flexibility without career penalties, communities rebuilding support structures that reduce isolation. Each choice chips away at the current inertia. Those who persist through long examinations like this one demonstrate commitment to understanding root causes rather than reacting to surface symptoms. You have traced connections across economics, psychology, culture, demography, and daily life without flinching from uncomfortable conclusions. That persistence equips you to act with foresight where others drift reactively. The institutional adaptations continue to unfold in ways that quietly reshape the texture of ordinary life for millions who may not yet connect the dots between distant fertility statistics and their immediate surroundings. Municipal budgets in growing numbers of counties now allocate smaller portions to playground maintenance and larger shares to senior center upgrades because demographic data submitted annually shows clear inversion in age pyramids. Parks departments replace aging swing sets with low impact walking paths, benches with extended backs for better lumbar support, and open fields once used for youth soccer with community gardens tended by retirees who have time and patience for weeding. Recreation coordinators schedule Tai Chi in the mornings and line dancing in the evenings rather than after school basketball clinics that once filled the same gymnasiums. The shift feels incremental to those living through it. Yet over a decade, the cumulative change transforms public spaces from hubs of youthful energy into quieter zones of gentle movement and reflection. Museums and cultural venues adjust exhibition strategies to capture audiences whose life experiences diverge sharply from previous generations. Curators notice that family memberships decline while individual senior passes rise, prompting more programming around mid century nostalgia, historical retrospectives on post war prosperity, and interactive displays about technological revolutions that shaped the baby boom era. Traveling blockbuster shows focused on impressionist masterpieces or ancient civilizations draw steady crowds of childless professionals who appreciate the intellectual stimulation without the logistical hassle of strollers and snack breaks. Children's museums in secondary cities downsize or rebrand entirely as STEAM labs for homeschool cooperatives and weekend enrichment for the fewer families still participating. The cultural conversation tilts toward preservation of memory rather than creation of new legacies through art made by and for young people. Funeral homes and cemetery operators observe parallel patterns that speak volumes about long term demographic arithmetic. Pre need funeral planning sales climb steadily among people in their 50s and 60s who have no children to handle arrangements later. Cremation rates continue rising, partly for environmental reasons, but also because families shrink. And the tradition of large graveside gatherings loses practicality when siblings live continents apart and cousins barely know one another. Memorial services trend smaller and more curated, often held in non traditional venues like favorite restaurants or parks, because attendees consist primarily of friends accumulated through careers rather than extended kinship networks. The industry quietly develops new revenue streams around digital legacy management, archiving social media accounts, creating interactive online memorials, preserving video messages, because physical graves receive fewer visitors over time when no direct descendants remain to tend them. Insurance companies recalibrate actuarial tables with increasing precision as mortality and morbidity patterns shift. Life insurance policies marketed to single adults emphasize final expense coverage and accelerated death benefits for chronic illness rather than large death benefits earmarked for surviving spouses and minor children. Long term care riders gain prominence in policies sold to professionals who openly discuss planning for scenarios where they reach advanced age without family caregivers nearby. Disability income protection becomes a harder sell among younger cohorts who already embrace gig work and side hustles that allow them to scale effort up or down according to health status. The financial services sector as a whole begins treating prolonged singlehood as the default rather than the exception, designing products that assume assets will pass to charities, nieces and nephews, or chosen heirs rather than lineal descendants. The automotive industry provides another clear window into changing household composition. Minivan production volumes drop year after year, while crossover SUVs marketed as versatile solo or couple vehicles see steady sales growth. Features once standard in family haulers, third row seating, built in DVD players, rear entertainment systems become optional add ons or disappear from trim levels entirely. Electric vehicle adoption accelerates partly because smaller households require less range for daily commutes and charging infrastructure suits urban professionals better than rural families. Car sharing services expand in cities where ownership loses appeal when parking costs rival monthly payments and public transit suffices for most needs. The roadscape itself changes subtly. Fewer oversized family vehicles clogging school pickup lanes, more compact cars and scooters weaving through downtown traffic. Grocery chains fine tune shelf space and inventory algorithms to match evolving consumption habits. Family sized packages of cereal, juice boxes, and frozen pizzas give way to single serve portions, premium organic produce for one or two, and meal kit ingredients portioned precisely to minimize waste. Deli counters expand hot bar selections of gourmet salads and protein bowls designed for desk lunches rather than home cooked dinners for four. Bakery sections shrink wedding and birthday cake orders while growing demand for artisanal sourdough loaves and individual pastries marketed as self care treats. Loyalty programs track purchasing patterns and push personalized coupons accordingly. More wine discounts and specialty cheese promotions for households without children fewer baby formula rebates, and diaper deals. The publishing world reflects similar realignments in what readers seek and purchase. Memoir sections in bookstores filled with titles written by women in their 40s, reflecting on career peaks followed by unexpected emptiness. Self help shelves stock increasing numbers of books promising fulfillment through solitude, boundary setting in relationships, and redefining success beyond traditional markers. Parenting guides still sell steadily, but lose relative shelf dominance to titles about chosen family, late life reinvention, and building community without biological ties. Fiction leans toward stories of complicated friendships, ambiguous romantic endings, and protagonists who choose themselves over partnership. The literary conversation grows more introspective and less dynastic because fewer authors write from the perspective of raising children into adulthood. Professional associations and networking groups evolve their focus to serve members whose life stages diverge from earlier norms. Young professionals chapters shrink while mid career and executive roundtables expand. Mentorship programs shift emphasis toward peer to peer advising among people who share similar child free timelines rather than generational handoffs from parents to children in the same field. Conference programming includes more sessions on work life integration for single adults, burnout prevention in high achievement cultures, and succession planning that accounts for absent heirs within family businesses. The professional identity, once tied to providing for dependents, now centers on personal brand sustainability and legacy through influence rather than lineage. The volunteer landscape shifts as well, with organizations once dependent on parental involvement now relying on retirees, empty nesters, and committed singles. Habitat for Humanity builds sites, see fewer family teams swinging hammers together on weekends, and more corporate sponsored groups fulfilling service requirements. Animal shelters report higher adoption rates among childless households who treat pets as primary companions. Food banks and meal delivery programs for the homebound draw steady volunteer pools from people who have flexible schedules and fewer competing family obligations. The civic energy that once flowed through PTA meetings and scout troops now channels into environmental causes, political activism, and neighborhood improvement projects that require less long term commitment. These myriad micro adjustments accumulate into a society that increasingly resembles an archipelago of individuals rather than a tightly woven web of intergenerational households. Connections form through shared interests, professional networks, and digital communities rather than through blood and marriage. The change brings certain advantages: greater geographic mobility, reduced conflict over child rearing philosophies, more discretionary income for personal pursuits, and lower pressure to conform to traditional timelines. Yet, it also introduces vulnerabilities: thinner safety nets during illness or economic downturn, fewer automatic caregivers in old age, reduced resilience against societal shocks that require collective effort, and a cultural atmosphere that can feel thinner and less rooted. Individuals navigating this landscape develop coping strategies that range from pragmatic to philosophical. Some double down on chosen family models, building deep friendships that approximate sibling or parental bonds through decades of mutual support. Others invest heavily in personal health and financial independence, calculating that self reliance offers the most reliable path forward. A growing minority quietly experiments with non traditional arrangements, platonic cohabitation with close friends, intentional communities that share resources and responsibilities, or polycules that provide emotional and practical support without conventional marriage. These experiments remain marginal but gain visibility because they address gaps left by shrinking biological families. The women who once led the charge toward total independence and now speak most candidly about its costs continue to influence the conversation in powerful ways. Their platforms serve as bridges between generations, offering younger women permission to question the orthodoxy without being labeled regressive. They emphasize that ambition and attachment need not remain mutually exclusive when sequenced thoughtfully and supported structurally. Their candor helps destigmatize choices that prioritize relationships earlier in life, creating cultural space for women to say openly that they want both meaningful work and a family without apology. Men who sustain deliberate distance from traditional expectations refine their approach to autonomy in ways that often surprise outside observers. They master multiple income streams that require minimal ongoing supervision: dividend investing, rental properties managed remotely, digital product sales, niche consulting. They maintain robust physical routines that preserve independence into later decades. They cultivate hobbies that provide flow states and community without emotional entanglement: competitive gaming clans, amateur astronomy groups, long distance cycling clubs. Their lives demonstrate that contentment remains achievable outside conventional partnership, challenging the assumption that long term solitude inevitably leads to misery. The tension between these two realities, women confronting the limits of solitary achievement, men finding stability in withdrawal, creates a kind of societal stalemate that persists until external pressures or internal realizations force movement. Economic necessity may eventually push more couples toward cooperative models simply because solo living becomes unaffordable in certain regions. Cultural fatigue with endless individualism may spark renewed interest in relational depth as a counterbalance to isolation. Biological clocks ticking louder than career alarms may prompt earlier family formation among those who still hold that option. Each factor adds incremental force to a potential realignment that remains impossible to predict with precision, but increasingly difficult to ignore. Those who follow these developments month after month recognize patterns that most people encounter only in fragments: a closing daycare center here, an expanding senior living facility there, a friend group that never quite forms families, a colleague who retires alone after decades of climbing ladders. Connecting those fragments into a coherent picture requires patience and willingness to look past comforting narratives. You have done exactly that by staying with this analysis through its full length and depth. The transformation reaches into the quietest corners of personal finance and wealth building strategies that once assumed multi generational continuity as the default endpoint for disciplined saving and investing. Financial planners now routinely open initial consultations by asking clients directly whether they anticipate direct heirs or plan to direct assets elsewhere, because the answer fundamentally alters portfolio construction, estate documents, and withdrawal timelines. Clients without children often opt for more aggressive growth allocations well into their 60s, reasoning that legacy concerns matter less than maximizing personal comfort during extended retirements that could stretch 3 or 4 decades. Those who once viewed life insurance primarily as a tool to replace lost income for dependents now purchase smaller term policies focused on covering final expenses or use whole life products purely as tax advantage savings vehicles. Charitable remainder trusts and donor advised funds gain popularity among high earners who channel wealth toward causes rather than bloodlines, creating a new class of philanthropic vehicles that replace family foundations in scope and ambition. Retirement communities market themselves less as places to slow down and more as vibrant campuses designed for active adults who intend to remain engaged professionally or creatively well past traditional retirement age. Amenities shift toward co working spaces, lecture halls, university style continuing education programs, and high speed internet infrastructure that supports remote consulting gigs or content creation side hustles. Golf courses still exist, but share space with pickleball courts, yoga pavilions, and art studios because residents prioritize variety over specialization. The sales pitch emphasizes community as chosen family, with built in social calendars that replicate the spontaneous interactions once provided by neighborhood kids and extended relatives dropping by unannounced. These developments sell out faster in desirable climates because they offer the closest approximation to interdependence without requiring biological ties or lifelong marriage commitments. The rise of pet ownership as a primary relational anchor deserves its own examination because it fills emotional space left vacant by absent children and partners in ways both touching and economically significant. Veterinary practices expand rapidly, adding emergency rooms, oncology departments, and behavioral specialists that mirror human healthcare sophistication. Pet insurance penetration climbs steadily as owners treat animals like family members, deserving comprehensive coverage. Boarding facilities evolve into luxury resorts with webcams, daily activity reports, gourmet meals, and even spa services because guardians travel more frequently and for longer periods without guilt tied to leaving children behind. The pet industry grows into a multi billion-dollar sector that captures discretionary spending once directed toward college funds, family vacations, and larger homes. Owners post daily updates about their animals with the same frequency and emotional investment once reserved for childhood milestones, creating digital photo albums that serve as substitute scrapbooks. This emotional redirection extends into consumer behavior around holidays and gift giving seasons. Retailers report steady declines in demand for children's toys and clothing, while premium adult experiences, spa weekends, cooking classes, concert tickets, high end electronics see corresponding increases. Black Friday and Cyber Monday sales data show fewer family oriented purchases and more individual self gifting. Noise canceling headphones, ergonomic office chairs, smart home devices that enhance solitary living, and subscription services for streaming, meditation apps, and personalized nutrition plans. Greeting card aisles shrink sections devoted to new baby congratulations and first day of school sentiments, while expanding categories for self love affirmations, friendship milestones, and pet birthday cards. The cultural rhythm of seasonal celebrations gradually decouples from family centric traditions and reorients around personal milestones and chosen relationships. Workplace culture absorbs these shifts in subtle but pervasive ways that affect everything from casual conversations to formal policies. Water cooler talk about children's sports schedules, school projects, and family vacations gives way to discussions of travel plans, home renovation projects, and fitness goals. Employee resource groups, once focused exclusively on parents, now include affinity networks for single professionals, child free by choice members, and those building chosen families. Benefits packages expand offerings like mental health days, sabbatical options, and fertility preservation stipends, while parental leave policies remain generous but see lower utilization rates among cohorts that delay or forego parenthood entirely. Performance reviews increasingly emphasize individual contributions and personal brand development rather than long term loyalty tied to providing for dependents. The implicit contract between employer and employee changes from mutual investment in a shared future to transactional exchange of skills for compensation and flexibility. The gig economy and creator economy thrive partly because they align so well with lifestyles that prioritize autonomy over institutional stability. Platforms that facilitate freelance writing, graphic design, virtual assistants, online tutoring, and content creation attract millions who prefer controlling their schedules to climbing corporate hierarchies that demand constant availability. Many of these workers deliberately cap income at levels that allow comfortable but uncomplicated living rather than pursuing maximum earnings that would require reinvestment into family infrastructure. The freedom to pause work for weeks at a time, relocate seasonally, or pivot entirely to new interests without disrupting household dependence becomes a core value proposition. Success stories shared in these communities rarely highlight massive wealth accumulation. Instead, they celebrate location independence, time sovereignty, and the ability to say no to demanding clients without financial collapse. Digital nomad visas issued by various countries explode in popularity as professionals in their 30s and 40s seek environments that match their child free realities. Reliable, high speed internet, co working spaces, affordable healthcare, and vibrant expat communities rather than family friendly schools and safe playgrounds. Cities like Chiang Mai, Medellin, Lisbon, and Belize become hubs where remote workers cluster, forming temporary but intense social networks that provide companionship without long term obligation. These enclaves create microeconomies around co working cafes, language exchanges, adventure travel groups, and wellness retreats that cater specifically to people who have decoupled their daily rhythms from traditional family structures. The psychological literature begins to reflect these emerging realities with increasing urgency. Studies on happiness and life satisfaction now routinely include variables for parental status, partner presence, and social network density rather than treating family formation as an assumed positive endpoint. Researchers document what some call the singles paradox: higher reported autonomy and lower day to day stress among never married childless adults compared to parents, yet steeper declines in meaning and purpose scores as those adults enter midlife and beyond. Longitudinal data tracking cohorts born in the 1980s and 1990s shows widening gaps in self-reported loneliness between those who form families early and those who prioritize career or independence. The findings challenge earlier assumptions that material success compensates for relational deficits and suggest that humans remain wired for connection in ways that digital friendships and professional networks only partially satisfy. Therapeutic approaches evolve to address these specific forms of distress. Clinicians report growing caseloads of high functioning professionals who present with vague but persistent emptiness despite outward markers of achievement. Treatment protocols incorporate existential frameworks that explore purpose beyond self actualization. Grief work around unchosen childlessness or unformed partnerships, and values clarification exercises that help clients distinguish between culturally imposed goals and authentic desires. Support groups for late diagnosis infertility, voluntary childlessness regret, and midlife singlehood proliferate both online and in person, creating spaces where people can name losses without judgment or platitudes. The therapeutic conversation shifts from fixing perceived deficits to mourning real trade offs and then constructing alternative sources of meaning that respect biological and emotional realities. Philosophical and spiritual currents begin to respond as well, with thinkers exploring what fulfillment looks like when traditional telos of family and legacy no longer dominates the horizon. Some revive Stoic and Buddhist traditions that emphasize equanimity in the face of impermanence and detachment from outcomes beyond personal control. Others draw from virtue ethics frameworks that locate meaning in character development, service to community, and cultivation of excellence, regardless of relational status. Emerging secular spiritualities centered on awe, wonder, and connection to something larger than the self gain traction among people who reject both religious orthodoxy and pure materialism. These frameworks provide intellectual scaffolding for lives that diverge from historical norms without collapsing into nihilism. Despite the weight of these observations, glimmers of adaptation and resistance appear in places least expected. Certain tech companies quietly introduce policies that support employees who choose to start families earlier, fertility benefits that cover younger applicants, flexible sabbaticals for parenting, and promotion tracks that accommodate career interruptions without permanent penalty. Some venture capital firms begin backing startups that solve pain points for young families. Affordable modular housing, community childcare cooperatives, remote first tools designed for work life integration, because founders in their 20s increasingly express interest in building businesses that align with personal values rather than purely extractive growth. Grassroots movements form around shared housing experiments where unrelated adults create intentional households that share expenses, chores, and emotional labor in ways that approximate extended family without marriage or blood ties. These developments suggest that the current trajectory, while powerful, is not immutable. Human beings retain capacity for course correction when the costs of a particular path become undeniable and alternatives become visible. The women who speak most forcefully against the girl boss orthodoxy do so from a place of hard won clarity rather than ideology, and their audience grows because the evidence accumulates daily in empty apartments, quiet holidays, and private moments of doubt. Men who sustain distance do so from rational self preservation, yet many remain open to partnership when mutual respect and reciprocity replace entitlement and competition. The next phase likely belongs to those who synthesize the lessons of both sides without romanticizing either extreme. Women who pursue meaningful work while remaining attuned to relational opportunities in their 20s and early 30s. Men who develop strength, skills, and emotional steadiness while staying receptive to genuine connection rather than defaulting to permanent withdrawal. Couples who negotiate roles pragmatically rather than ideologically, recognizing that complementary strengths produce greater stability than enforced sameness. Communities that rebuild practical support systems, whether through neighborhoods, online networks, or formal cooperatives, that reduce the isolation that currently amplifies regret on one side and caution on the other. The quiet accumulation of these institutional and commercial realignments eventually produces a feedback loop that further entrenches the very conditions driving them forward. When fewer children enter the world, educational institutions scale back teacher hiring, which reduces job security in one of the few professions historically attractive to women seeking work life balance. Reduced hiring then discourages young women from pursuing education degrees, shrinking the pipeline of future educators even more. The same pattern repeats across sectors tied to family life. Pediatric specialists train fewer residents because caseloads decline. Daycare chains consolidate or exit markets entirely. Toy companies pivot to adult collectibles, and the cultural artifacts once created for children, books, films, games, grow scarcer or target niche nostalgia markets instead of fresh generations. Each contraction removes another layer of infrastructure that might have encouraged or supported family formation among those still on the fence, creating an environment where opting into parenthood feels logistically daunting even for couples who desire it. Urban planning departments in major metropolitan areas begin to internalize these realities when updating 20 and 30-year master plans. Projections show steady population stagnation or decline in core districts once fueled by young families moving outward, prompting rezoning efforts that favor higher density micro apartments, co living towers, and senior focused mixed use developments over single family subdivisions. Park designs shift from expansive play structures and ball fields to linear greenways optimized for jogging, cycling, and dog walking. Public transportation models prioritize frequent service during peak professional commuting hours rather than family friendly routes to suburban schools or weekend leisure destinations. The built environment literally hardens around a future with fewer prams, school buses, and minivans, signaling to anyone paying attention that the city now expects and plans for prolonged singlehood or couplehood without dependence. Tax policy debates grow sharper as governments confront shrinking revenue bases that no longer benefit from the compounding effect of larger households contributing over multiple decades. Property tax receipts flatten when family sized homes sell less frequently and for lower relative premiums. Sales tax collections dip on categories historically driven by child rearing, backpacks, sports equipment, larger appliances, and bulk household goods. Income tax dynamics shift as dual earner childless couples often occupy higher brackets but produce fewer future taxpayers to sustain entitlement programs designed during eras of population expansion. Policymakers float ideas ranging from baby bonuses scaled by income to tax credits for elder care provided by non relatives. Yet these proposals rarely gain traction because they clash with entrenched fiscal priorities and cultural resistance to anything perceived as pronatalist coercion. The conversation stays stuck in incremental tweaks while the underlying arithmetic continues deteriorating. Corporate human resources departments quietly rewrite internal succession frameworks to account for the absence of heirs in family owned businesses and the reduced likelihood of long tenured employees grooming their own children as future leaders. Executive search firms notice a subtle but persistent uptick in C suite candidates who list no dependence on personal profiles, prompting recruiters to adjust questions about relocation willingness, work life demands, and legacy motivations. Leadership development programs emphasize personal resilience, adaptability, and self branding over mentoring the next generation within the firm because fewer participants arrive with the assumption that their career arc includes passing the baton to biological offspring. The corporate ladder, already precarious, grows even more individualistic as the implicit promise of building something lasting for one's family fades from the motivational landscape. Media consumption habits evolve in lockstep with these broader changes. Streaming algorithms learned that childless viewers binge prestige dramas, limited series, and documentary formats at higher rates than family audiences who fragment viewing around children's programming and shared screen time. Production budgets flow accordingly. Fewer animated features aimed at young children, more adult oriented prestige projects exploring themes of isolation, ambition, regret, and late life reinvention. Advertising slots during prime viewing hours sell to brands selling luxury skincare, high end travel, premium audio equipment, and investment apps rather than minivans, diaper subscriptions, or family vacation packages. The cultural mirror held up by entertainment reflects back a society increasingly comfortable narrating stories about solitary journeys, ambiguous endings, and self discovery without the traditional resolution of marriage and children. Social media platforms, once flooded with baby announcements and milestone posts, see content streams diversify towards solo travel vlogs, home renovation time lapses, pet parenting reels, and career transition stories. Influencers who built audiences around motherhood face plateauing growth, while those documenting child free luxury lifestyles, digital nomad routines, or midlife reinventions gain followers at accelerating rates. Hashtags celebrating independence and self prioritization trend consistently higher than those tied to family milestones. The platform economy rewards content that resonates with the growing plurality of users living alone or in small households, creating a self reinforcing cycle where visibility shapes aspiration and aspiration shapes visibility. The dating landscape continues mutating under these pressures in ways that deepen the original disconnect. Matchmaking services catering to high net worth professionals introduce tiered memberships that include compatibility assessments focused on life stage alignment, family orientation, and long term vision rather than surface level chemistry alone. Speed dating events rebrand as curated mixers for specific demographics, 30 something, career focused women seeking partners open to late parenthood, 40 something men interested in companionship without pressure for children, or mixed groups explicitly advertising child free preferences. Niche apps emerge for those who want partnership but reject traditional timelines, offering filters for voluntary childlessness, elective single parenthood, or openness to step parenting later in life. The market fragments because the underlying preferences fragment, with fewer people sharing the same basic assumptions about what a committed relationship should produce. Friendship networks adapt by taking on heavier emotional and practical loads than in previous eras. Close friends become default emergency contacts, power of attorney designees, and holiday companions when biological family ties thin or geographic distance grows insurmountable. Birthday celebrations shift from family gatherings to chosen group trips or dinners that mimic the warmth once provided by relatives. Moving help, pet sitting rotations, and illness check ins circulate within tight circles of unrelated adults who invest years building reciprocal support systems. These arrangements provide genuine security, yet require constant maintenance and negotiation absent the automatic obligations that kinship once supplied. The fitness and wellness industries capitalize on this reality by marketing longevity and vitality as primary goals rather than preparation for active parenting. Gym chains expand recovery focused services, saunas, cryotherapy, massage studios, because clients prioritize personal optimization over family functionality. Supplement brands push NAD boosters, collagen peptides, and mitochondrial support formulas targeted at preserving cognitive sharpness and physical independence into the 80s and 90s. Yoga retreats and meditation centers offer month long immersions designed for deep self inquiry rather than quick stress relief between school runs. The wellness conversation centers on extending high quality solo years rather than building resilience for multi decade child rearing demands. Financial independence communities online grow particularly vocal about rejecting lifestyle inflation tied to hypothetical dependence. Forums buzz with strategies for keeping housing costs below 20% of income, minimizing vehicle ownership, cooking in bulk for one or two, and automating investments that compound without requiring active management. Members celebrate hitting milestones like paid off mortgages in their 30s or coasting on passive income in their 40s because those benchmarks grant freedom from both corporate grind and relational compromise. The ethos emphasizes sovereignty over legacy, calculating that personal peace in the present outweighs uncertain returns from investing in family formation. Despite the momentum behind these patterns, countercurrents persist and occasionally gain surprising traction. Certain regions with cultural or religious cohesion maintain higher fertility through deliberate insulation from mainstream individualism. These pockets produce visible contrasts: bustling school events, packed youth sports fields, expanding family oriented housing developments, and local businesses thriving on child related spending. Observers note that such communities often feature strong mutual aid traditions, affordable housing relative to income, and social norms that celebrate parenthood without shaming career ambition. The success of these outliers suggests that demographic decline is not universal law, but outcome of specific incentives and cultural defaults that can be challenged locally. Younger cohorts entering adulthood show flickers of recalibration that could compound over time. Surveys of people born after 2000 reveal higher percentages expressing desire for marriage and children than their millennial predecessors did at the same age. Many cite observing older siblings or cousins struggle with prolonged singlehood, career burnout, or late life regret as motivating factors. They seek information about realistic sequencing, completing education, gaining career traction, then prioritizing partnership before fertility windows narrow significantly. Online spaces dedicated to balanced life planning, combining ambition with attachment, grow rapidly because they fill a gap left by mainstream messaging that still leans heavily toward uninterrupted career focus. Entrepreneurs launch ventures that directly address pain points created by the dominant trend. Startups offer modular housing designs optimized for multi generational or chosen family living at lower price points than traditional single family homes. Others build platforms connecting women who want children but lack partners with men open to co parenting arrangements without romantic entanglement. Apps facilitate neighborhood childcare cooperatives where parents trade hours rather than paying market rates for daycare. These experiments remain small scale but attract attention because they tackle root frictions: cost, isolation, mismatched expectations, rather than papering over them with temporary incentives. The women who transition from corporate high achievers to vocal critics of that path continue expanding their reach through podcasts, books, and speaking circuits. Their narratives resonate most when they avoid blame and instead focus on trade offs made visible only in hindsight. They describe the precise moments clarity arrived: a quiet apartment after a promotion celebration, scrolling past family photos during holidays, health scares that highlighted lack of built in support. They urge younger women to treat their 20s as a finite resource for both professional foundation and serious relational investment rather than an endless runway for achievement alone. The message gains power because it comes wrapped in authenticity rather than ideology. Men who maintain intentional distance refine their philosophy into something more affirmative than mere reaction. They articulate visions of life built around mastery, contribution, and peace. Mastering a craft that provides income without corporate oversight, contributing through mentorship or community projects without family strings attached, preserving mental clarity through minimalism and routine. They share frameworks for evaluating potential partners: evidence of gratitude, emotional steadiness, willingness to build rather than extract, because they recognize that re engagement becomes possible only when conditions shift from adversarial to cooperative. The broader culture stands at a threshold where continued momentum toward atomization risks crossing into fragility that even the most self reliant struggle to navigate alone. Yet human adaptability remains the constant variable. People have always adjusted family strategies to economic realities, cultural pressures, and technological changes. The current chapter looks stark because the experiment in radical independence ran furthest and fastest, but history suggests that when costs mount visibly enough, behaviors pivot. The pivot may not restore 1950s norms, it likely produces hybrid models that blend individual agency with intentional interdependent selective commitment with flexible roles and personal ambition with relational purpose. The momentum behind these institutional and demographic adjustments creates a kind of societal inertia that becomes progressively harder to disrupt the longer it persists. When school districts close buildings and consolidate campuses, the remaining facilities grow larger and more impersonal, reducing the intimate community feel that once made sending children there feel natural rather than obligatory. Larger class sizes follow. Parent teacher interaction drops as teachers juggle more students and extracurricular options thin because funding follows enrollment numbers downward. Families who might have considered having a second or third child hesitate when they see the local system stretched thin and less nurturing than it was for older siblings. The decision to limit family size or skip parenthood altogether gains another small but real reinforcement from the environment itself. Real estate developers respond to these signals with laser focus on what sells fastest in the current market, and high rise condominium projects marketed to empty nesters and young professionals dominate new construction permits in many regions, featuring rooftop terraces, concierge services, pet spas, and gym facilities that rival commercial clubs. Ground level townhome developments aimed at starter families become rarer outside specific suburban pockets because the absorption rate lags behind units designed for one or two occupants. Builders calculate that a single adult or couple can absorb higher per square foot costs more readily than a family of four or five, stretching a budget across multiple needs. The housing stock literally tilts towards smaller footprints, higher density, and amenities that prioritize personal convenience over communal play space or extra bedrooms. Energy consumption patterns shift in tandem with household size contraction. Utility companies report flatter peak demand curves because fewer homes run multiple loads of laundry, dishwashers, and ovens simultaneously to feed growing families. Heating and cooling loads stabilize at lower levels per capita as living spaces shrink and occupancy remains constant or declines. Solar panel installers notice stronger uptake among homeowners who plan to age in place alone or with a partner rather than pass properties to children who might want to renovate or expand. The grid grows more predictable, but also more vulnerable to disruptions when fewer ratepayers support the fixed costs of maintenance and expansion. Waste management systems adjust collection routes and processing capacity downward in neighborhoods where recycling bins fill slower and garbage volume per household drops noticeably. Compost programs expand because single person households generate more food scraps relative to overall trash when cooking smaller meals. Landfill projections extend further into the future because the sheer mass of discarded consumer goods slows without the churn of outgrown clothing, broken toys, and obsolete baby gear that once accelerated turnover. The environmental footprint of a society with fewer births shrinks in certain categories while growing in others. More packaging for single serve products, higher per capita electronic waste from prolonged gadget upgrades, increased travel related emissions from adults seeking experiences to fill relational voids. The insurance sector refines risk models with granular precision as actuarial data accumulates on childless versus parental cohorts. Premiums for certain life and health policies diverge based on projected longevity and morbidity profiles. Childless adults who maintain disciplined fitness and nutrition habits often qualify for preferred rates because their claims history shows lower incidence of certain stress related conditions tied to parenting pressures. Conversely, policies covering long term care rise faster for those without adult children nearby because professional caregiving costs fall entirely on personal savings or insurance rather than being offset by family assistance. The industry quietly incentivizes behaviors that extend independent living while pricing in the higher probability of institutional care later. Corporate real estate strategies adapt to workforce composition changes that mirror demographic ones. Office towers, once designed with large floor plates for teams that included parents needing proximity to daycare drop in centers, now feature more flexible pods, quiet focus rooms, and wellness suites that cater to individuals who treat the workplace as a primary social hub. Lunchroom conversations shift from coordinating family logistics to planning weekend escapes or discussing home automation upgrades. Companies reduce on site childcare subsidies or eliminate them entirely when utilization falls below viability thresholds, redirecting those budgets toward mental health resources, gym memberships, or extended personal time off policies that suit solo lifestyles. The automotive aftermarket reflects similar adaptation. Dealers stock fewer roof mounted bike racks, trailer hitches for family camping, and third row seating conversions while expanding inventory of premium audio systems, custom lighting packages, and performance upgrades for personal vehicles. Car detailing services see increased demand for interior protection treatments on leather and electronics because owners keep cars longer and treat them as mobile sanctuaries rather than temporary family haulers. Electric bike and scooter sales climb among urban dwellers who need short range mobility without the bulk of a minivan. The road going population ages alongside the human one, with more gray haired drivers in late model sedans and crossovers designed for comfort over cargo capacity. Consumer electronics manufacturers adjust product roadmaps to serve households where shared family screens give way to multiple personal devices. Television sizes stabilize or shrink slightly in average selling price categories because living rooms no longer need to accommodate group viewing from distance. Smart home ecosystems emphasize individual control, separate voice profiles, zoned audio, personalized lighting scenes over family coordination features like shared calendars or kid safe modes. Gaming consoles market heavily toward adult titles with deep narrative immersion rather than multiplayer family friendly experiences. The digital living room fragments into parallel personal streams rather than a single communal focal point. The travel industry pivots hard toward experiences that fit smaller party sizes and flexible schedules. Cruise lines expand solo cabins with no supplement fees. River cruises marketed to independent travelers, and expedition voyages that attract professionals seeking adventure without coordinating school breaks. Hotel chains convert family suites into premium king rooms with work desks and spa bathrooms. Airline loyalty programs reward frequent solo flyers with upgrades and lounge access more aggressively because business class cabins fill with childless professionals who travel year round rather than during seasonal windows. Destination marketing shifts toward cultural immersion, wellness retreats, and culinary tours rather than theme parks and all inclusive family resorts. The food service sector mirrors this granularity. Chain restaurants downsize portion offerings and introduce more small plate sharing menus that suit couples or individuals dining alone without waste. Delivery platforms optimize algorithms for single serving orders, premium ingredients for gourmet home cooking for one, and meal prep kits portioned precisely to avoid leftovers that go uneaten. Ghost kitchens specialize in upscale comfort food designed for solo consumption with elegant presentation that elevates the experience beyond basic takeout. The restaurant landscape grows more intimate and curated because the average party size shrinks and diners prioritize quality over quantity. These countless small pivots accumulate into an economy and culture that increasingly normalizes and optimizes for the childless default. The normalization happens gradually enough that most people experience it as natural evolution rather than deliberate redirection. Younger adults entering the market inherit a world already structured around individual autonomy, housing options, job flexibility, entertainment formats, financial products, all calibrated to lives without built in dependence. The path of least resistance leads toward extending that pattern because every surrounding system reinforces it. Yet the very completeness of this adaptation begins to expose its limits. When almost everything optimizes for solitude or couplehood, the absence of counterbalancing forces becomes stark. Cities designed for perpetual young professionals grow quieter on weekends and holidays. Workplaces lose the softening influence of employees who bring stories of children's innocence and family chaos. Cultural products grow more introspective and less generative of new audience generations. Economies contract in sectors that rely on compounding human capital over decades. The system starts to feel brittle in ways that even the most capable individuals notice during moments of vulnerability, illness without nearby help, career setbacks without family buffer, aging without automatic caregivers. The women who speak publicly about regretting the full embrace of career over family paths often highlight this brittleness most clearly. They describe reaching points where professional success no longer compensates for the lack of fallback relationships that absorb life's inevitable shocks. Their accounts resonate because they name the quiet dread that accompanies realizing the safety net was never built. They point out that independence feels liberating until it becomes isolation, that financial buffers cannot replace human presence during hard seasons, and that time borrowed from family formation cannot be repaid later with interest. Men who have stepped back from traditional roles offer a complementary perspective. They demonstrate that withdrawal can produce genuine calm and control when the alternative appears chaotic or exploitative. They build systems, financial, physical, social, that allow them to weather storms independently. Yet, even among the most content, conversations in trusted spaces sometimes reveal an awareness that certain experiences, watching a child discover the world, sharing long term triumphs and failures with a committed partner, remain outside their chosen architecture. The tension between these two lived realities sets the stage for whatever synthesis eventually emerges. Neither full retreat into solitude nor desperate return to outdated models satisfies enough people to dominate. The middle space, where individuals retain agency while cultivating intentional interdependence, requires experimentation, honest communication, and structural support that current incentives rarely provide. Those experiments already happen in scattered ways: shared housing cooperatives, career paths that accommodate parenting without derailing advancement, communities that revive mutual aid traditions without religious or ideological gatekeeping. The outcome hinges on whether enough people recognize the current trajectory's diminishing returns before systemic strain forces sharper corrections. History shows that societies adapt when pressure mounts visibly enough through economic necessity, cultural exhaustion, or generational turnover. The current generation of young adults, having watched the full arc of the independence experiment play out in real time, may prove the pivot point. They have access to unfiltered accounts from both sides, clearer data on fertility windows and happiness correlates, and fewer illusions about endless upward mobility. This extended mapping of consequences from the macro level of cities and economies down to the micro level of daily consumer choices reveals a coherent pattern. A cultural emphasis on individual maximization, when pursued without counterweight, reshapes everything it touches until the landscape matches the philosophy. The reshaping brings efficiency and freedom in certain dimensions while introducing fragility and emptiness in others. Recognizing that trade off clearly without exaggeration or minimization allows anyone paying attention to choose their own position within it deliberately rather than by default. The cumulative weight of all these layered adaptations eventually produces a society that feels profoundly different from the one that existed just a few decades ago, even though the change arrived through thousands of small, rational decisions rather than any single dramatic event. Neighborhoods once defined by the sounds of children playing outside until dusk now carry a quieter ambience, with adults walking dogs at twilight or jogging with earbuds in, each person moving through their own carefully constructed routine. The absence of youthful noise is not dramatic at first. It registers slowly as fewer Halloween decorations appear on porches, fewer Christmas lights strung across front yards, fewer backyard birthday parties spilling into the street with balloons and laughter. What replaces that energy is a more polished, controlled atmosphere. Manicured lawns maintained by landscaping services rather than family mowing crews. Security cameras replacing the informal neighborhood watch of parents keeping an eye out. Electric vehicle charging stations where minivans once parked. The streetscape itself communicates a shift toward privacy, efficiency, and self contained living. This new normal extends into the rhythms of commerce and service industries that once depended on family scale consumption. Dry cleaners report fewer dress shirts and children's uniforms coming through, more casual athleisure and professional outerwear for video call wardrobes. Laundromats in urban areas install more single load machines and fewer industrial size washers because household laundry volumes drop when there are no growing children producing mountains of sports gear and school clothes. Hardware stores stock fewer swing set kits, sandbox borders, and backyard playscape components while expanding selections of smart locks, home office ergonomic furniture, and high end grill accessories for sophisticated solo or couple entertaining. The retail ecosystem quietly recalibrates to serve people who invest in their immediate living space rather than in tools for raising the next generation. Professional services follow suit. Family law practices see caseloads shift from divorce and custody battles toward prenuptial agreements for later in life marriages, cohabitation contracts for non romantic housemates, and estate planning that designates charities or distant relatives rather than children. Accounting firms handle more individual tax strategies centered on maximizing retirement contributions and Roth conversions for people planning extended solo retirements. Real estate agents specialize in downsizing consultations for empty nesters who never filled the larger homes they once bought, expecting families, or in helping mid career professionals purchase properties optimized for remote work and personal hobbies rather than guest rooms and play areas. The service economy grows more tailored to the needs of autonomous adults who treat their homes as personal sanctuaries rather than family headquarters. The legal and financial architecture surrounding inheritance and legacy undergoes its own quiet revolution. Trust and estate attorneys draft more sophisticated instruments that distribute assets across multiple causes. Scholarships in the donor's name, environmental funds, animal welfare organizations, because direct descendants are absent or distant. Philanthropic advisors see increased demand for impact investing strategies that allow wealthy individuals to shape the future through capital allocation rather than through biological heirs carrying on family names or businesses. The concept of legacy migrates from lineage to influence, endowing university chairs, funding medical research, supporting arts institutions, or creating community programs that outlive the individual. This redirection of wealth creates a different kind of intergenerational transfer, one based on ideas and institutions rather than direct family continuity. Cultural institutions that once relied on family memberships and multi generational attendance now pivot toward appealing to individual curiosity and lifelong learning. Symphony orchestras offer more matinee series marketed to retirees and midweek evening performances for working professionals without childcare constraints. Museums expand adult education programs, curator led tours, and members only events focused on deep dives into collections rather than interactive children's exhibits. Libraries transform large portions of their space into maker labs, digital media studios, and quiet reading rooms for adults pursuing personal projects. The cultural life of cities grows more sophisticated and specialized because it serves audiences with disposable time and income, but without the logistical complications of coordinating family schedules. The world of sports and recreation continues its gradual reorientation toward adult participation and spectating. Youth leagues consolidate into elite travel teams that require significant parental investment, pricing out casual family involvement and further reducing overall participation. Adult recreational sports, flag football, softball, ultimate frisbee, expand dramatically in urban and suburban areas, often organized through apps that match players by skill level and availability rather than neighborhood or school affiliation. Professional sports franchises notice demographic shifts in ticket buyers. More season ticket packages sold to small groups of friends or corporate clients, fewer family four packs. Stadiums add premium clubs, craft beer selections, and experiential activations designed for adult enjoyment rather than child friendly zones. The energy at games changes. More measured appreciation, less of the chaotic enthusiasm that comes from young fans experiencing their first live events. Even language evolves under these pressures. Terms once common in everyday conversation, mom taxi, dad jokes, family vacation, lose frequency, while phrases like self care routine, chosen family, solo travel goals, and child free by choice gain currency. Social media captions celebrate personal milestones, home office completions, solo marathon finishes, pet adoption anniversaries, with the same enthusiasm once reserved for first steps and graduations. The lexicon reflects lived reality. Fewer people speak casually about the kids because fewer people have them, and the default assumption in mixed company shifts toward individual rather than familial frames of reference. This linguistic drift accompanies a broader psychological reorientation. Mental health professionals document rising demand for therapy focused on constructing meaning in the absence of traditional markers. Clients explore questions of purpose when career peaks arrive earlier than expected, and no children follow to extend that sense of contribution. Therapists help individuals grieve unlived possibilities, not always with regret, but with acknowledgement that certain doors close naturally when others open wide. For some, the work centers on embracing the freedom of a lighter footprint. For others, it involves building intentional communities that provide surrogate kinship without romantic or parental obligations. The therapeutic space becomes a laboratory for experimenting with new definitions of a life well lived. Meanwhile, the men who have chosen paths of minimal entanglement continue to demonstrate viable alternatives. They maintain lean operations, modest housing, efficient vehicles, automated investments that allow them to step away from high pressure environments whenever desired. They cultivate deep but low maintenance friendships centered on shared activities rather than emotional processing. They pursue mastery in domains that interest them: martial arts, musical instruments, coding side projects, wilderness skills. because those pursuits deliver intrinsic satisfaction without requiring external validation from partners or children. Their lives prove that sustained contentment remains possible when expectations align closely with reality and when energy is conserved rather than endlessly expended. The women who publicly reckon with earlier choices add a different but equally important piece to the puzzle. They speak about the moment when professional accolades stopped registering as fulfillment, when promotions felt like obligations rather than victories, when the silence of an empty home after a long day began to outweigh the buzz of achievement. Their accounts help younger women see trade offs in real time rather than hindsight. They advocate for sequencing that respects biological timelines without abandoning ambition, pursuing education and early career momentum while staying open to serious partnerships, treating dating as intentional rather than incidental, evaluating potential partners on compatibility and character rather than status markers alone. Their influence grows because they offer a third way between total career immersion and complete domestic retreat. These parallel narratives, men finding peace through simplification, women rediscovering value in connection, begin to create cultural space for hybrid approaches that neither side fully anticipated. Some couples experiment with one partner maintaining flexible professional work while the other focuses on home and children during peak years, then reversing roles or blending both as circumstances allow. Others build lives in lower cost regions where one income covers essentials and side ventures provide discretionary funds, freeing both partners from the dual full time grind. Still others form intentional networks, shared childcare arrangements among friends, co housing setups that include communal meals and mutual support, that reduce the isolation and financial pressure that once made family formation feel prohibitive. The emerging possibility is not a return to any idealized past, but a pragmatic evolution that integrates lessons from the independence experiment. Women retain access to education, careers, and personal development while recognizing that relational investment yields compounding returns different from financial ones. Men maintain autonomy and self respect while remaining open to partnerships that offer mutual benefit rather than obligation. Society begins to rebuild support structures, affordable housing reforms, workplace flexibility that does not penalize parents, community models that reduce isolation, because the costs of not doing so become too visible to ignore. This long journey through the consequences of prioritizing individual maximization above all else reveals a fundamental truth. Humans are adaptable, but adaptation has limits when it runs contrary to deep seated needs for connection, purpose, and continuity. The current configuration has produced efficiency, innovation in certain domains, and unprecedented personal freedom in others. It has also produced measurable increases in loneliness, declining birth rates, institutional strain, and a pervasive sense that something essential is missing from the equation. The correction, when it arrives, will likely be uneven, partial, and full of compromise. Yet it will happen because people ultimately seek lives that feel whole rather than merely optimized. You have stayed with this examination from its opening premise through every ripple and repercussion because you understand that real understanding requires following the chain all the way to its end. That persistence positions you ahead of the curve, able to navigate these changes deliberately rather than reactively, to recognize emerging alternatives early, and to contribute to whatever balanced future eventually takes shape. If this complete breakdown has helped clarify the forces at play and cut through the usual surface level commentary, show some support by grabbing a Red Bull through the link in the description. It keeps these deep, no holds barred explorations coming. Leave a comment with your final takeaway from the entire discussion. What pattern stands out most clearly now that you've seen the full picture? What do you think happens next? Your thoughts wrap this conversation in real world perspective. Like the video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you like the video, share the video. And just remember that all roads lead to MWA, men walking away, and cheers.
Nothing says you care like crypto. Nothing can compare. Nothing says you care like crypto. Oh, nothing can compare to crypto.